Hi, I'm Bob Herbert. Welcome to OpEd.tv. This presidential election was one for the ages, but not one that will be fondly remembered. And except for losing candidates, some of the roughest memories will have to be shouldered by the pollsters and public opinion experts who weren't just wrong about the Donald Trump-Hillary Clinton matchup. They were wildly, almost unbelievably wrong. We'll talk about that with one of the foremost practitioners of the craft, Lee Miringoff, the longtime director of the Marist Institute of Public Opinion at Marist College, where he is also a professor of political science. Lee, welcome. Thanks
My pleasure.
for coming in. We're going to try and not beat up on you guys
No.
too much.
Actually,
I'm going to give you...
get equal time with the wrong pollsters.
But my first question
sure.
is, how did so many pollsters and public opinion experts, but also almost everyone in the media, get this wrong?
Yeah. Well, first of all, by the attorney, my attorney would say the Marist Poll was actually right on.
That was my second question.
Yeah, okay. So we can get to that.
We're going to get to that.
So we were actually the closest nationally, and then we did our final 3 state polls, and our numbers were all good. So I guess we've made flipping a coin into a science at Marist. But there's a lot of things that went on in this election, and some of it affect the polls, and some of it didn't. And I think the most significant thing was these polling aggregators, who have become sort of this cottage industry.
Exactly.
The Real Clear, the HuffPost, 538, the Upshot at the Times. I guess they don't call it Upstart, but
no,
Upshot. But all these polling aggregators, and what they do is they take polls, and some of them do them differently. There's a lot of different methods now. People are using traditional live interviewers, calling people on cell phones and landlines like we do, but there was also panels, there was internet polling, there was online polling. There's a lot of new experimentation that are really unproven at this point.
Right.
And they did not have a good
So
night.
not really scientific polling.
Well, they're trying.
These.
There's a serious people trying to sort of do things quicker and cheaper, and they were unproven, but in a lot of ways they were included in some of these aggregators. So what happens is they make the stew, they throw all of them in, and then they give you an average. Now, there's some problems with that because they then would take the average and then they would model it.
Right.
So then you'd hear, 82.6% chance that Clinton was going to win. And it was unclear, people barely get an understanding of polling, and this now is some kind of forecasting model,
right,
which is the next step. So if you're going to build this house around questionable polls, you don't want to then model it around those questionable polls. So I think that was a really serious problem in sort of what was being communicated, and then it fed on itself, and then the media was all reacting to this narrative that Hillary Clinton was going to be close, but that she was likely to win.
If we put the aggregations aside, which is difficult to do in this media age of ours, but if you put them aside and look back at the more traditional polls, you would have a handful of polls with a track record, and we could look at what they were finding. So my first question is about the Marist Poll.
Okay.
Tell me what you guys found in the last days leading up to the election.
Well, our national poll had Hillary Clinton ahead by a point. So that
1
was
point.
1 percentage point. So that's very close to where it is, although the official numbers won't be certified for quite some time.
Well within the margin of error.
Absolutely. Then we wanted to get a sense of whether she was expanding the battlefield to other places. So we actually took a look at Arizona, Texas, and Georgia, which turns out not to have been necessarily the right places to look at, but our Arizona number was within a point. Our Texas number was actually dead on. We were a little understating of Trump in Georgia. We had him winning. But so of those two of the 3 states, and the national numbers were really spot on, and they showed different parts of the electorate. In some places where there was a large Latino population, she wasn't quite getting the numbers everybody expected. Given the campaign, people thought this was going to be a slam dunk with the Latino community for her. And, Sir Trump got what Romney got pretty much. And then we looked in some of our national polls, and we could see that these white blue-collar folks, these, the old Reagan Democrats, were sort of not in her corner. And I think she made a decision early on to go after his temperament and let the populism go. And these people in the states that she had trouble with, ultimately, the Pennsylvanias and the Ohios and the Wisconsins and Michigans, in that industrial Midwest, those became problematic, and she really wasn't talking to them.
Did you guys have her losing Pennsylvania?
We didn't do Pennsylvania in the last couple of weeks, so
You didn't.
And I think everything realistically changed after the FBI letter.
Well, that was one of my
yeah.
questions, whether you thought that
Yeah,
the back and forth by James Comey, the FBI director, the back and forth on the FBI investigation into her emails, did you find, and maybe you've looked at it since the election, did you find that that had much of an impact?
Yeah, less so in the before and after polling than just understanding where the election went. And I think, yes, it did. I think both these candidates had extremely unprecedented high negatives.
Right.
So these were two very unliked folks. And I think the Comey thing brought back the, who was going to have the last word? What was the story going to be at the end as they approached the finish line? And it ended up being her emails, not his treatment of women or any of that stuff. When that was on page one, clearly she was starting to open up this 5 to 10 point lead.
Right.
And then the emails came in, and I think even his retraction the last weekend, although that was on factual basis good for her, I think it was still another email story.
Right.
And,
so it puts email back in the minds of the voters just as they're about to go into the voting booth.
So I think there was a sense of, the Clintons, there was enough stuff there. They both had baggage, but who got the last word? If you look at the history of this campaign, after the conventions, she moves up. And that was, right after, he had a bad week with the Miss Universe, I believe it was.
Right.
And then after each debate, it was kind of like Clinton's move up, but then she couldn't sustain it. And so it really would, when the topic moved to the end, and he didn't have access to his iPhone,
Right.
and it was dictating whatever he was doing.
They took his Twitter account away from him.
That he was really so. The last argument on the table, I think, had it was a close election. The last argument on the table, I think, was really, really very, very telling.
But again, though, I'd like to ask, putting the aggregators aside, the traditional polling operations, did any of them really pick Trump to win?
No. And I don't think there were...
And the reason I'm asking that question is because I want to know what the pollsters and the public opinion experts, not the aggregators, do going forward.
Well, okay, that's a fair question. There were, I think, two groups who were using non-traditional methods. There was an experimental group that USC and the LA Times was doing, which was a panel poll.
Yeah.
And they had Trump ahead all along. Now,
and they were seen as an outlier.
That's right.
All along.
And Trump's numbers, his final number, which Hillary has a slight edge, they were as close to to Clinton's number, as the pollsters who had Clinton too far ahead. So they're both about the same distance. They're both either equally right or equally wrong.
Yeah.
But they didn't really have have it nailed. And you raised the outliers, and I think that's really an interesting concept, because in this era of social media, one of the things you get if you have something that's a little different, and I'm not talking about the LA Times USC poll, but generally, we came out with that one point when the conventional wisdom was, she's winning 5-6 points, whatever. And you get labeled an outlier if you have something that's difficult.
It's different, yeah.
And today's outlier may be tomorrow's conventional wisdom. So you can't. So that's why they also do these averages, because if there's 5 polls showing Clinton winning by 6 points and you have it dead even, they can mute that difference by averaging it all together. It's a bad way, because an average of an average, not to get too technical, has a wider margin of error than any individual poll.
So I want to get back to the point of whether we rely too much on polls, too much on data. But first, let's look at let's look at the breakdown of the vote as far as you can tell. So what groups voted for Trump? Just clearly.
Well, I mean, he did well among male voters. She did well among women, not as well as she had hoped to. He did very well with blue collar people without a college education, but he also did better than expected among middle-class voters, people who also have felt the economy has, passed them by. The key factor in all this was change and anti-establishment.
Yep.
Donald Trump on the Republican side, Bernie Sanders on the Democratic side for a long time. If there was anybody who was the embodiment of the establishment, it was Hillary Clinton. So the matchup was really very much in his favor, and people who wanted change, went for her. People thought, do you have experience to be president?
Right.
Do you have the qualifications? He did. 35% thought he shouldn't even be commander in chief. So the basic functions went her way, the basic responsibilities. But in terms of let's shake things up, let's break it and put it back together again, because Washington has been out of touch and dysfunctional. That's where he really cashed in on.
So you mentioned middle class voters. Well, Hillary, who carried white college educated voters?
The white college educated, I believe, and then some of the numbers are not totally baked in yet, but I believe that she did not carry them despite.
She was expected to
That's
carry
right.
them. They
That's
went
right.
for Trump.
She carried women.
No,
She
but I
carried-
mean,
but-
white college educated voters voted for Trump.
Yeah, yep.
And it was expected that she would carry
Yeah.
that vote. All right, we're not going to hold you to them because the numbers are still
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
processed,
Yeah.
but that's what we know, or what we think we know at this point.
On that point, though, white women
Voted for Trump.
by 52, yeah. So,
Yeah.
but that was where she was going to do this whole
Exactly, it
white
was gonna be
suburban college
overwhelming, yeah.
educated thing. That did not materialize in the numbers that she had thought.
So then, what happened? I thought the Latino surge that had been talked about was real. The reason being, they kept saying they saw, or these are commentators on television, kept saying that they saw this surge in the early voting and that it was overwhelming. So I didn't think it was going to be something that would dissipate. Did any kind of surge like that materialize or not?
No, the Latino vote was about 1% higher of the total turnout than it has been. And that's to be expected because of the population shifts.
Right.
So there was no unusual surge beyond the natural growth. We talked about this on a previous time I was on your program, and the number of white voters as part of the electorate has declined. When Bill Clinton was elected in 1992, 87% of the electorate was white. When Barack Obama was re-elected 4 years ago, that number had fallen to 72%. So it was really interesting to see what share of the vote was white this time. Did it rebound or did it continue to decline? And it actually went from 72 to 70. So the natural change demographically occurred in this election. The problem for Hillary Clinton was she didn't get enough whites, and she didn't, overwhelmingly get the Latino vote as much as she wanted to. And even the African American vote, which was overwhelming for her, was not in the 90s because there was, some minor party candidates. She didn't quite get there wasn't that 95 to 3 kind of thing.
Which I never expected anyway, because blacks were not going to turn out in the same numbers for Hillary as they did for Barack Obama.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But
Although Obama, who did a phenomenal job campaigning for her, and his approval rating, ironically, is in the 50s. Usually when the incumbent is in the 50s, you can pass the baton in terms of his approval rating, and that was not able to do this.
Well, yeah, but that approval rating was not enough to move this overwhelming white vote
That's right.
for Trump.
No.
So, but what I think it's interesting that for all the attention that was paid to Trump's negative comments about Mexicans and immigrants and build the wall and all that kind of stuff, there's no evidence in your numbers to show that moved Latino voting very much.
Somewhat, not a lot.
But not a lot.
But flipping it back to the Trump side, the Trump campaign was all about attitude. So this is why a lot of the pundits missed it, because what would knock out a candidate in any traditional thing? George Bush in 1992 looks at his watch during the debate. Al Gore sighs into the microphone in 2000.
Yep.
Compare that to the 150 plus comments that Donald Trump made. So this was not a fact-based constituency for him. It was an attitudinal base. And when he said, I could go on Fifth Avenue and shoot someone, it probably wouldn't affect my support, that reflected his understanding that he was tapping into something that was very real for a blue-collar and, to some degree, middle-class group on the economy.
A final question about the women's vote and Hillary. How did she do with the overall women's vote compared to how Barack Obama did, let's say, in 2012 with the women's vote?
She did about the same.
About the same.
So there was an expectation that if there was a little fallout among African American voters, as was anticipated, given what Trump had been saying, the expectation was she would pick up a little among the Latino community, that surge, and that she would make up for it with white suburban women with a college education. She was okay with them a little bit, but not anywhere near the numbers. Net effect, the women's vote came in pretty much as expected, and the Donald Trump numbers among men were strong. So therein lies the difference. Although Trump gets 2 million fewer votes than Mitt Romney gets, but Hillary Clinton gets 5 million fewer votes than Barack Obama got. So the turnout was not this overwhelming, message.
Even with all the attention that we were just wrong on so many fronts. I mean, I really did think turnout was going to be much higher, just simply because, if for no other reason, this was being viewed as a reality show. Who's going to be thrown off the island? But even that didn't materialize.
Yeah, well, these were not popular candidates. And issues drive voters to the polls. Okay. You and I have talked about this in previous shows. I mean, it's not who's ahead or who's behind. You can have a lopsided race, and you can have good turnout if people feel that there's something there to vote for. And in this election, this was an election of rejection. If you were a Trump person, you were rejecting Hillary Clinton. If you were a Clinton person, you were rejecting Donald Trump. I mean, they had almost 60% negatives, each of them going in. It's unprecedented. In an open seat, how well known these two people were, and how they divided along this anti-establishment outsider status, which we always like in American politics, versus kind of like the DC type. And look, there's a reason we tend to elect governors, not senators.
As opposed to senators, legislators.
But this time, we went one step further and went outside even the normal realm of politics.
Wasn't even a governor.
To take someone who had no political experience, no military experience. First time in our nation's history, someone will take the oath of office with both of those.
Very important issue that you raised, though, the idea that issues will drive voters to the polls, in this case, not personalities. And I think that through much of the media, not everybody, but through much of the media, and especially the way it was covered on television, the view was just the opposite. That the importance was the personalities,
well, that's what
and the issues were overlooked.
Our politics has so become that, in a consultant, campaign poll-driven climate. This stuff is so micro-targeted and all, and even Trump, for all of his lack of a traditional political campaign, in the last few months, he was being very much directed by his polls, and they knew which swing states to go to, and they know where to campaign, and they were honing their message a little bit. I mean, it wasn't quite amateur hour. In the beginning, in the primaries for the GOP, it was pretty much him just winging it. But that really changed, and there were some top flight professionals around him in the fall when it looked like Hillary Clinton was on her way.
They locked him onto the teleprompters, and as you pointed out, they took away his Twitter account. I mean, he was like, I'll look over here.
Well, that's how he became news. And the idea was to put it on to Hillary. And that's why I think that the whole Comey thing was, for her, an absolute disaster, because it brought back all the stuff the Clintons Foundation, the Clinton Foundation, this and that, all the way. You heard Whitewater being mentioned again. I mean, there was this sense of here we go again, and that was really troublesome for enough voters to make a difference. Again, it was a close election in these states that tipped his way. And we're not talking about landslides within those states. We're talking about narrow differences.
So let's go back to looking at the polls and. Have we, as a society, collectively, just come to depend too much on data and polling and surveying? And I'm asking not just in the context of political campaigns, but just in general. It seems to be all about numbers.
Well, let me start with the political side of it. Without the public polls, the journalists would be totally dependent, and the public, on what the campaigns are saying and doing.
And
So-
what the people are thinking, so you could go out and talk to people.
That's right. So the man on the street kind of interviews, and that can obviously be, not very accurate. So what was the narrative? A poll best, and you get away from the hard numbers of decimal points, carried out six decimal points. But, a poll would be, help understand like that Donald Trump on the Republican side, there was support for him.
Right.
So when he says all those things at the convention, and you don't have the energy, and little Marco Rubio, and Ted Cruz is a liar, and all that stuff, and everybody's saying, boy, this is not going anywhere. Well, the polls were showing that there was support for him, even if then people interpreted, well, it's not real, it's not going to last. But that was the interpretation of the polls, which was wrong. So we do tend, I think, to overlook that the best use of public polls is to provide a narrative, to help with the story, that this was going to be a close election, and that it was for Donald Trump about attitudes, so that you could understand why all those non-conventional things he said, those politically incorrect things he said, might not have been as damaging, because everybody was always saying, when does he sort of drop? And ultimately, he didn't. So I think that's now, we do tend to get too data-driven. I think that get back into the aggregators. I think, when you start talking about, 82%, 0.6% of Hillary Clinton winning, I think that's just gone way, way out of the bounds of what we need to be talking about.
And especially if you're talking about 6 months before the election, 8 months before the election, a year before the election, we've got these polls, and then all the discussions on television are driven by these polls, as opposed to your point about the issues. I'm going to keep coming back to that.
Well, if you were focusing on the issues, you might have uncovered not what was going on in the Washington area, but that Donald Trump had
right, exactly,
connected with a sentiment that was real
and then
in people's
why
lives.
was that connection occurring? Exactly. So, you would explore, he's made this connection. One, you'd recognize that. And two, what was that connection about?
So if you as a journalist, you might take the polls, a public poll, and then go with it, and you might fly out to a blue-collar area where the factory's closed somewhere in Ohio and get a sense of, well, what's going on here? And you would find, as you've done when you've toured the country in earlier elections, I mean, what is on public's mind?
Right.
And the issue was not, this notion that she had experience and stuff. She was in some ways the Jeb Bush of the Democratic Party. If Hillary Clinton had 17 opponents in the Republican field, I'm not sure she would have emerged.
I don't think she would have emerged, and I'd like to talk about that more. We've run out of time. The half hour went so quickly. Lee, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.
We'll be back in a moment with a final word. Either I'm dreaming, or this is not the kind of country I thought it was. In this dream, I thought I heard a major party presidential candidate deride Senator John McCain, a genuine war hero who was shot down over Hanoi, captured, bayoneted, tortured, and held prisoner for more than 5 years. This presidential candidate in my dream said of McCain, "I like people who weren't captured." It must have been a dream, because this major party candidate very publicly and grotesquely mocked a disabled reporter. "You ought to see this guy," the candidate said, while garbling his words, contorting his face, and making exaggerated muscle spasm movements with his arms. I guess it was supposed to be funny. But weird things happen in dreams. Like this candidate saying the worst things about women that I've ever heard a so-called serious public figure utter. I can't say them on television, but it's just as well, because it probably never happened. It must have been a dream. The candidate also talked about the benefits that would come from South Korea and Japan arming themselves with nuclear weapons. And he didn't seem to know anything about our own nuclear triad, which is the three-pronged way that the United States is capable of delivering its nukes. Anyone nominated for president by one of our major political parties would know that. He didn't. The dream got very scary at that point, but I must not have come awake, because the scariest part was still to come. And it was the very hardest part for me to believe. This candidate was actually elected President of the United States. It was at that point that I tried to wake myself from this nightmare but to no avail. The only saving grace is that I know it had to be a dream. Either that, or the United States, a country that I have always loved, is nothing like the country I once thought it was. That's all for now. See you next time.